Hi, welcome to this training course on how to develop and implement a fundraising strategy for marine protected areas offered by MedPan in association with the Tunisian National Agency for Coastal Protection, the NGO Notre Grand Bleu, and Briouni National Park with the support of the consulting company Rio Impact. My name is Laura Attondé, and I will guide you step by step through this training. But before getting to the heart of the matter, let's start with a few words about MedPan regular training program. This course on how to develop and implement a fundraising strategy for marine protected areas is part of the regular training program of the MedPan network. This program is structured in thematic training cycles such as financing, in which this course can be found, species and habitats, or fisheries. With a strong operational focus, each thematic cycle unfolds into a series of training courses providing MPA managers and other stakeholders with a comprehensive learning path that aims to enhance their knowledge and skills so that they may effectively address challenges in marine protected areas. Depending on their focus, training courses are designed for distance learning, face-to-face, or like this one in a hybrid format combining both approaches. The regular training program of the MedPan network is supported by 5 MPAs acting as training centers around the basin. They contribute their in-house expertise to the development of training courses and host on-site training sessions. As such, this course has benefited from the technical expertise of Brioni National Park in Croatia and the Kriat Island MPA in Tunisia, co-managed by the National Agency for Coastal Protection and the NGO Notre Grand Bleu. Following a partnership approach, the training program builds on resources developed by MedPan and the training centers, as well as by other organizations. The aim is to coordinate available training resources for Mediterranean MPAs within a joint catalog and through repeated delivery of the training courses over time to effectively address the broad and multiple capacity building needs of MPA managers and stakeholders throughout the Mediterranean. For more information and to check what training resources are available, you should visit the MedPan website at www.medpan.org. But now let's go back to our actual training. The overall objective of this training on fundraising is to provide MPA managers and practitioners with the basic knowledge, core technical skills, and soft skills, such as coaching on interpersonal communication skills with donors, as well as with methodologies and tools they need to develop and implement a fundraising strategy that is consistent with their MPA conservation objectives. This training course consists of a series of video tutorials and exercises supplemented by supervised online sessions and a face-to-face session with trainers. Module 1 is an introductory module to the training delivery entirely in video format. Module 2, Financial Needs Assessment and Cost-Benefit Analysis. Module 3, Donor Mapping. Module 4, Definition of a Fundraising Communication Strategy. Module 6, Innovating Financing Mechanisms. And Module 7, How to Develop a Fundraising Proposal, will be composed of a theoretical online video and a practical face-to-face session. Module 5, Engaging and Negotiating with Donors, and Module 8, Designing a Comprehensive Fundraising Strategy, will be delivered entirely in a face-to-face format and will be dedicated to practical exercises. But note that following modules 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7 video tutorials, you will be asked to complete an assessment you will find on medpan.org. This short test will allow you to check your understanding of the topics covered in the video tutorials. Again, you can find all the materials and resources for this course at www.medpan.org. In this first tutorial, you will be introduced to the key steps in developing a fundraising strategy for marine protected areas. Let's start with the definition. What is a marine protected area? In line with the definitions given by the Convention on Biological Diversity and the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN, MedPan defines a marine protected area as a clearly defined marine geographical space, including subtidal, intertidal, and supratidal terrain and coastal lakes and lagoons, connected permanently or temporarily to the sea, together with its overlying water, recognized, dedicated, and managed through legal or other effective means to achieve the long-term conservation of nature with associated ecosystem services and cultural values. A marine protected area is therefore an area where human activities are more strictly regulated and managed than in the surrounding waters in order to achieve conservation objectives. However, while the primary purpose of an MPA is clearly the conservation of marine biodiversity and ecosystems, MPA also contribute to enhancing responsible and sustainable economic development, such as sustainable fishing or responsible tourism, for the benefit of coastal communities. On a global scale, where the IUCN estimates that less than 3% of the world's oceans are free of human pressure, marine protected areas are increasingly recognized as an effective tool for managing and enhancing marine ecosystems. In this context, more than 190 countries have today committed to protecting 30% of the oceans by 2030 as part of the 2016 IUCN World Conservation Congress. Conservation challenges are particularly important in the Mediterranean, which is considered one of the world's top biodiversity hotspots, with a high rate of endemism, as 20% of the marine species present can only be found in the Mediterranean. The biodiversity hotspot is under pressure from the cumulative effects of urbanization of coastal areas inhabited by 150 million people, intensive maritime traffic, mass tourism, oil and gas exploitation, overfishing, land-based and marine pollutions, and drastic climate change impacts such as warming water, deoxygenation, acidification, coastal erosion, or invasive species threatening ecosystem, as well as economies. What is the Mediterranean MPA system like? MPA coverage has increased significantly over the years, reaching 8.3% of the Mediterranean Sea under protection status in 2020. But as can be seen on the map, the distribution of MPAs is very uneven across the basin. MPAs are mostly established in shallow coastal waters, and 97% of them are located in the European Union. This map also reflects the complex overlap of the different designation statutes comprising the Mediterranean MPA system. In orange, MPAs with the national statute, meaning that they have been legally designated by a state. There are currently 75 different MPA designations of national statute in the basin, such as national park, nature reserve, marine reserve, regional natural park, etc., with legal and regulatory provisions that greatly differ from one country or designation to another. In green, the network of Marine Natura 2000 sites, limited to EU member states. In blue, the Pelagos Sanctuary, currently the only MPA in the Mediterranean with international statute, which extends over France, Italy, Monaco, and alone accounts for 1/3 of the total surface area of MPAs in the basin. Managing an MPA involves different types of costs, such as recurrent costs for staff and equipment to carry out sea patrols, long-term monitoring, communication campaigns, meeting with stakeholders, or also investment costs in specific study or in infrastructure such as visitor center. These costs vary from an MPA to another. And according to a 2022 UNEP study, globally, marine protected areas do not receive sufficient revenue to cover their management costs, especially in developing and least developed countries, which leads to less effective management of protected areas. A 2017 study by Gill and al. Found that adequate staff capacity and budget capacity are the strongest predictor of conservation impact. MPAs with adequate staff capacity have ecological effect 2.9 times greater than MPAs with inadequate capacity. A management overview from a survey of 254 MPA managers in 2019 showed that Mediterranean MPAs generally lack adequate financial resources to properly achieve their conservation objectives, especially in non-European countries. Overall, in the Mediterranean, only 5% of the national MPA that answered this survey considered their budget to be sufficient. For 17% of them, the available budget is acceptable, whilst for 30% the available budget is considered as insufficient, and 8% declare that there is no specific budget for the management of the MPA. It should be noted that only MPAs from EU countries indicate they have budget considered as sufficient, whilst 28% of MPAs from non-EU countries declare to work with an insufficient budget or with no budget at all. Responses from the sample of MPAs also show a strong disparity between EU and non-EU countries in terms of budget security, with unfortunately none of the non-EU countries' MPAs declaring their budget to be fully secured. The lack of budget security in non-EU countries may be a result of insufficient public funding. At the global level, funding for Mediterranean MPAs comes primarily from national public funds, contributing an average of 70% of the budget in the EU compared to 50% outside. Conversely, international donors contribute more significantly to MPA funding in non-EU countries, 50% of the budget on average, than in EU countries where their average contribution is 30%. Self-generated incomes contribute to MPA's budget in about the same proportion, between 30 and 40%, across the basin, whereas only EU MPAs receive private sector funding. Many MPAs report significant funding from other sources. This trend is quite similar throughout the Mediterranean, although more pronounced in non-EU countries where, in a significant number of cases, it is the main source of funding. Well, further study would be needed to identify the types of funds that fall into this other category, but we can assume this includes project-based funding. Indeed, other recent surveys highlight the increasing dependence of MPAs on project-based funding, which is often seen as time-consuming while not allowing them to address core management needs. Data collected for this report show that in 96% of cases, one main source of funding predominates, while other sources remain secondary within the same MPA. This suggests that MPA funding sources are not sufficiently diversified. However, many funding mechanisms, both conventional and innovative, can be mobilized by MPAs. The implementation of a fundraising strategy will help leverage new sources of funding. Which leads us to the following questions. What is a fundraising strategy and why is it important? We took this quote from a BirdLife report because it seemed very meaningful to us. Fundraising is not about asking for money, but about selling an idea. Funding of all kinds is a partnership between the donor and the recipient. Charitable trust, foundation, and the bilateral and multilateral aid agencies are established to give money away. If you provide them with a good project to fund, You are helping them meet their objectives. There is here the idea that fundraising is the same as selling a product. It is about finding the good argument that will make the conservation activities of the marine protected area attractive to potential investors. Fundraising is initially the process of raising funds in the form of donation from various private or public sources in order to mobilize funds for an organization of general interest. In a broader sense, fundraising refers to the mobilization of funds in different forms and not only in the context of grants, such as loans, equity, self-financing mechanism, etc. While there is no common definition of a fundraising strategy, in the case of the training, the fundraising strategy consists of determining and implementing the key steps to achieve effective fundraising from both conventional and more innovative funding sources in adequacy with identified funding needs. Here are the key steps of a fundraising strategy. These steps will serve as a guideline for the training. First, we need to identify our financial needs. How much money do we need for our current and future conservation activities? Second, we need to identify and select the relevant funding sources we want to access. Once we have identified potential donors, we need to implement a fundraising communication strategy to plan how we will reach donors and sell them our activities with appropriate communication. Then comes the steps of engaging and negotiating with donors and developing a good fundraising proposal to access the funds. As a preliminary step to this training on fundraising, we encourage you to check out training resources on business planning for Mediterranean MPAs available at medpan.org. The training on business planning offered in the Medpan training catalog should be seen as a prerequisite for this training on fundraising, as your fundraising strategy should build on an assessment of your MPA's funding needs consistent with its management plan and conservation objective, which is what business planning is about. Through the business plan, you will be able to assess the financing gap of the MPA, which you will then seek to fill through the fundraising strategy. This training is available as a series of video tutorials that will help you understand the main concept of business planning for MPAs and how to autonomously use the Medpan business planning tool, which you will find with the tutorials on medpan.org. Now let's see together what the different modules of the fundraising training will consist of. In Module 2, you will assess the funding needs of your MPA. This module will be covered partly online and partly face-to-face. As mentioned earlier, you will use a series of video tutorials of the Medpan Business Planning tool available on medpan.org in the training package Business Planning for Mediterranean MPAs that will allow you to assess your MPA's financing gap through the business plan. An introduction to cost-benefit analysis will then be presented. As a tool for decision-making, cost-benefit analysis makes it possible to assess the future cost and benefits, financial and non-financial, of a project or activity. This type of analysis is particularly useful as part of a fundraising strategy, as it will help you shape the main selling point with potential investors. Module 3 will focus on donors mapping with the aim of identifying the most relevant sources of funding to be mobilized for your MPA. Both public and private opportunities will be explored. Among public donors, an overview of domestic and international opportunities will be analyzed, and a focus will be made, for example, on the opportunities of the Global Environment Facility, the French Facility for Global Environment, and the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund. Among the opportunities related to the private sector, private funds and foundations will be presented. This module will also be covered partly online and partly face-to-face. Module 4 will help you define your fundraising communication strategy. To do that, and before planning any communication activity, you will need to analyze where you stand, and the SWOT analysis will help you do that by identifying your MPA or organization or project strengths and weaknesses, and the opportunities and threats it can face. Based on this analysis, you will be able to define your communication strategy based on several elements. What key message you want to communicate? Which methods and tools will you use? What is your budget? How will you monitor and evaluate actions? This module will give you the theoretical and practical tools to elaborate your own communication strategy. What are your goals and objectives? What is your target audience? Like previous module, Module 4 will be covered partly online and partly face-to-face. The fifth module will be covered entirely face-to-face and is not supported like the others by a video tutorial for distance learning. The face-to-face training workshop will focus on hands-on activities to provide you the essential basic skills to engage and negotiate with potential donors. This module involves practical exercises and scenarios that will provide you the necessary operational skills. You will learn how to identify donor expectations, how to engage with donors, how to make contact, how to prepare for meetings, how to maintain and develop long-term relationships, and how to prepare a speech. You will also be trained in negotiation techniques. Module 6 will explore more innovative funding opportunities outside the traditional donor patterns seen in Module 3. This module will be covered partly online and partly face-to-face. We will explore opportunities related to payment for ecosystem services, opportunities related to innovative initiatives involving the private sector through corporate social responsibility partnerships, and green bank cards. Opportunities related to impact funds and conservation trust funds, in particular the MedFund. Opportunities related to self-financing mechanisms such as concession fees and visitor fees. Self-financing mechanisms will be introduced through training resources developed by MedPan and BlueSeeds. Finally, Module 7 will give you the tools to develop a fundraising proposal, exploring in particular the different elements necessary for the realization of a concept note and a full project proposal, targeting key funding sources such as the Green Climate Fund or the EU LIFE program. The module will include an e-learning part and a face-to-face part. That's it for this introductory module on the key steps of a fundraising strategy and the presentation of the content of the training modules you will follow with us. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing for you for Module 2 on financing needs assessment and cost-benefit analysis.